Welcome to Echo Tales. We invite you to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories and heartfelt narratives. Now, let's begin today's episode. A careless splash of oat milk into Denon's coffee, followed by a light, unconcerned laugh. Oops, sorry. Not mine, though. My cup, a forgotten sentinel, mirrored my own state. Cold, untouched, invisible for months. Her gaze, never once meeting mine, lingered instead on the rim of his mug, meticulously wiped clean as if by a devoted acolyte. My eyes fixated on her hands, once a sanctuary for my own, their nervous energy a familiar comfort in my palm. Now they grazed Denton's with an intimate familiarity, a choreography of touch that felt instinctual, ingrained. 2 minutes into this arranged coffee charade, and I yearned only for the earth to swallow me whole. The purpose of my presence here remained an enigma. Was it a pang of conscience? A fleeting moment of convenience? Perhaps it was merely a performance, to uphold the pretense that I remained a vibrant part of her world. I perched precariously on the far edge of the booth, sandwiched between the cool wall and a drooping potted plant that seemed to wilt from the palpable tension. Her work colleagues filled the remaining space, polished, boisterous individuals who wore denim jackets with ironic detachment and dissected user experience over expensive croissants. Denton, naturally, was their undisputed epicenter, and Kaylin, my wife, revolved around him, a satellite terrified of drifting out of orbit. He delivered a casual quip about their project manager's inability to distinguish Helvetica from Ariel, and the entire table erupted in laughter as if it were the wittiest remark of the decade. I offered a strained smile, then realized I was the sole, authentic one in a room full of feigned amusement. My coffee held the metallic tang of bitterness. I hadn't even added sugar, just a raw, unadulterated flavor of disappointment. She still hadn't introduced me. I was her husband, not a random guest, not a nameless stranger. Yet there I sat, visibly shrinking with each passing second, a phantom in my own marriage. At some point, Denton leaned in, whispering something conspiratorial to her. Her hand flew to her mouth in that performative, shocked expression, eyes wide, cheeks flushed. I knew that look intimately. I used to be the one who could evoke it before the quiet settled between us. My voice, a mere rasp, struggled past the constriction in my throat. I think I'm going to head out. She didn't hear me, or perhaps she heard and consciously chose silence. So I stood up, and still nothing. I traversed the length of that table with deliberate slowness, my heart aching for her eyes to meet mine, for someone, anyone, to inquire about my departure. They didn't. Why would they? At the threshold, I glanced back. She was laughing again. Not at me, not with me, but because of him. And in that moment, perhaps for the very first time, I grasped that sometimes the loss of a person isn't heralded by a quarrel, a betrayal, or a confession. Sometimes, it simply unfolds on a quiet afternoon in a bustling coffee shop, as you watch her laugh as if your very existence has slipped from her memory. I didn't go home. I simply walked past the cafe window, past the parked cars, past a couple arguing in front of Floor Shop. I walked aimlessly because in that instant, I had no destination. I couldn't return and pretend that what had just occurred hadn't irrevocably fractured something within me. Nor could I seek solace at a friend's place. Truthfully, I didn't have many left. Most had gradually faded over the years, after wedding invitations, baby showers, and awkward, unreturned texts. Kaylin had become my entire universe. And in that cafe, I painfully understood that I wasn't even a minor character in hers. She used to look at me as if I truly mattered. I remembered a rainy night during our first year of marriage. We were stranded in our car outside a movie theater, the wipers having failed. She laughed so heartily at the fogged-up windows that we simply sat there, talking for 2 hours. That night, I felt like the sole person in the world who commanded her undivided attention. But now, I was merely competing with a man who ordered lattes with a dusting of cinnamon and sported leather bracelets with an earnest lack of irony. I eventually found myself in a small park a few blocks away. I settled onto a bench and pulled out my phone, half expecting a missed call or a text from her asking about my whereabouts. Nothing. Just a mundane group chat about office maintenance requests and a weather app screaming about impending rain I couldn't care less about. I drafted a message to her. Hey, I left. Just felt weird being there. Then I deleted it. I typed another. Didn't mean to make it awkward. That too, I erased. What would have been the purpose? An hour bled into another. Finally, my phone buzzed. Kaylin, hey, everything okay? 3 words. That was the entirety of it. After sitting there, a specter, for 40 minutes, after rising and departing, after literally vanishing from a social gathering where I was meant to be her honored guest, all I received was, everything okay? I stared at the message as if it were a venomous creature, trying to find a weak spot to strike. I offered no response. 10 minutes later, she sent another. Sorry if I was distracted. Didn't always talks too much. LOL. My wife used LOL to nonchalantly dismiss the fact that she'd spent an entire afternoon giggling like a teenager at another man's every utterance, while I sat mere feet away, silently suffocating and pretending not to drown. Still, I offered no reply. Not out of anger. I wasn't engaging in games. I simply couldn't articulate the depth of that moment's wound without sounding like a melodramatic 12-year-old. And that's precisely what I had become, hadn't I? The overly emotional one, the perpetually needy one, the man who scrutinized every glance, every tone, and the absence of cream in a coffee cup. Eventually, the sun began its languid descent, and I walked back home. As I opened the front door, the interior lights were already aglow. She was there, perched at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, a glass of untouched wine beside her. She looked up, almost startled. Oh, hey, you didn't say where you were going. I didn't answer immediately. I kicked off my shoes, set my keys down, and gazed at her, as if trying to refamiliarize myself with her features, as if attempting to discern if the woman before me was still the person I had married, or merely a stranger who shared her name and visage. I was where you left me, I stated quietly. She furrowed her brow. What does that mean? It means I was right there with you at that table, and you didn't even truly see me. She blinked, feigning confusion or genuinely perplexed. Emery, come on. You're overthinking again. It was just coffee. No, I countered, my voice firm. It was the precise moment I realized I'm no longer even an afterthought to you. The ensuing silence wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was a still, heavy quiet, the kind of profound hush that descends after a long-avoided truth is finally spoken aloud. She lowered her gaze to her wine, and for once she didn't laugh. She remained silent for a considerable while, simply sitting there, pretending to study a label on the wine bottle, as if it suddenly held the profound secrets of our dissolving marriage. I stood opposite her, arms crossed, not from anger, but from a profound uncertainty of what else to do with myself. My hands had spent so long trying to cling to her that I had forgotten their purpose when left empty. I wasn't ignoring you, she finally said, setting the bottle down. I just didn't think it was a big deal. It was work stuff. Work stuff. I swear those 2 banal words have irrevocably damaged more marriages than affairs ever could. They are the convenient excuse of the century. They are the impenetrable armor people don when they refuse to admit they've stopped showing up for the person who has always been their steadfast ally. I walked over, leaning against the opposite counter, striving to steady my trembling voice. You didn't introduce me, Kaylin. You didn't look at me. You didn't even acknowledge my actual presence. She shook her head, a dismissive gesture. I didn't realize it was bothering you. You could have just said something. I did. I told you I was leaving. Yeah. But you didn't make it clear why. I thought maybe you had a headache or something. I emitted a humorless laugh, a small, broken sound that escaped before I could suppress it. A headache? No, Kaylin. I had a front row seat to witnessing my wife flirt with a man who clearly operates under the assumption that I don't exist. That's what I had. Her face twisted at the word flirt, yet she offered no denial. Instead, she rose slowly, like someone preparing to traverse a minefield. You're overreacting. And there it was, the inevitable incantation. For the past year, every attempt to articulate my pain, my confusion, or even the smallest tremor of sadness had been met with those dismissive words. You're overreacting, as if my emotions were some software glitch demanding a system reboot. As if my very human responses were mere bugs in a faulty system she couldn't be bothered to debug. I recoiled, shaking my head. You fundamentally misunderstand. You've been emotionally retreating for months. I felt it. You barely speak to me unless it pertains to bills or groceries. You go to bed with your phone. You wake up already consumed by thoughts of work. I've been patient. I've been steadfastly here. But today, that was fundamentally different. That was you making a conscious, public choice to erase me. She looked away, her jaw rigid. That's not fair, is it? I could feel the pressure intensifying behind my eyes. I loathed how susceptible I was to becoming emotional in such moments, how quickly my throat tightened. It made me appear weak, overly sensitive, too fragile to cope with reality. But perhaps the truth is I've simply been raw for too long, and now the tiniest scratch feels like a gaping, festering wound. I didn't do anything wrong, she muttered, crossing her arms defensively. You didn't do anything right either, I retorted, the words sharp and unyielding. She opened her mouth as if poised with a ready comeback, but nothing emerged. And in that profound silence, I made a terrifying realization. She didn't care enough to even fight for us. It was then that I walked past her into the hallway and stood before the guest room. It had once been a repository for extra coats and unopened wedding gifts. But lately, I'd found myself retreating there with increasing frequency after late-night arguments or passive-aggressive silences stretched too long. It had become unsettlingly familiar, far too familiar. I'm sleeping in here tonight, I announced without turning back. She made no move to stop me, didn't follow, didn't even utter my name. The door clicked shut behind me with a definitive finality, like a period marking the end of a sentence. And in that small, dimly lit room, surrounded by boxes we'd never bothered to unpack, I lay down on a creaky mattress and stared at the ceiling, wondering how a single cup of coffee could reveal what years of quiet, agonizing suffering never had. She hadn't forgotten me. She just didn't deem me worth remembering in that moment. The guest room felt colder than usual that night, as if the very air had absorbed the crushing tension I carried into it. I lay on the lumpy mattress, eyes wide open, staring at the uneven ceiling, hoping it might offer answers my wife wouldn't. I could faintly hear Kaylin moving about in the kitchen for a while, the soft thud of a wine bottle being set down, the fridge opening, a glass rinsing under the tap, then nothing. No hesitant knock on the door, no reassuring text, no footsteps echoing down the hall. She simply carried on. I tried to convince myself she was merely affording me space. That's the narrative I desperately clung to. But somewhere deep down, I knew the truth was simpler and infinitely more painful. She hadn't even truly noticed I was gone. Or worse, she noticed and simply didn't care. By morning, I still hadn't managed a wink of sleep. I rose before sunrise, brewed coffee in silence, and departed the house before she even stirred. I had no desire to be present when she eventually rolled over, saw the empty space beside her in bed, and gave it no more thought than she would have forgotten sock on the floor. I spent the majority of the day in my van, navigating from one sprawling tech campus to another, meticulously repairing broken drawer sliders and tightening loose desk legs, all while maintaining the pretense that my marriage wasn't collapsing with the same fragility as the furniture I worked on. Around noon, I sat in the parking lot of a client's building, a sandwich untouched on the passenger seat, simply staring at my phone. Not a single word from her, not a single message, nothing. So I initiated contact, a simple, polite, detached query. Hey, let me know if you want to talk later. 2 hours crawled by, then 3. Finally, she replied, I have a late client dinner. Don't wait up. No mention of the previous night's confrontation. No acknowledgement of the precipice we stood on. Just a casual dismissal, as if we hadn't just plummeted to the lowest point in years. I felt a cold constriction in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, but something far heavier, like I was slowly sinking into the depths of my own existence, and she was already standing on the shore, comfortably drying off. That evening, I returned home to a profound silence. She wasn't back yet. The house felt hollow, and not merely from her physical absence. I surveyed the objects we'd once chosen together. The framed prints, the throw pillows she'd obsessed over, the extravagant coffee machine I'd insisted on buying even though it cost more than our microwave. All of it now seemed like mere props in someone else's carefully constructed domestic tableau. I wandered into our bedroom. Her side of the bed was immaculately made, mine untouched. I noticed her perfume bottle on the dresser. I picked it up out of habit. It carried the ghost of the version of her I desperately missed. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about Denton, the man from the cafe. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't fabricating fantasies. I had witnessed the way she glowed in his presence. I had felt how swiftly I faded into insignificance when he was near. So, I did something I never thought myself capable of. I opened her laptop. I knew her password. She'd never bother to change it. At first, I hesitated. This wasn't my character. I wasn't the kind of man who snooped. But when you've been made to feel invisible for an agonizingly long time, you begin a desperate search for proof that you're not entirely losing your mind. I opened her email, scanned the inbox. Nothing overtly suspicious. Then I checked her calendar. There it was, stark and unambiguous. Dinner with Denton. 7:30 p.m. Not a client engagement, not a team gathering. Just Denton. I closed the laptop and remained motionless, not crying, not yelling, just sitting with the crushing weight of what I'd allowed myself to ignore for months. She hadn't cheated with her physical body. Not yet. But with her time, with her attention, with the very essence of herself that she once reserved exclusively for me. That profound betrayal had been unfolding overtly, right before my eyes. And I, like a fool, had been gratefully accepting the paltry crumbs. I didn't stir from that spot on the bed for what felt like endless hours. My mind wasn't racing. It was eerily quiet, uncomfortably quiet, like the profound stillness preceding a monumental storm. Only this time, I knew the storm wasn't brewing externally. It was already raging silently within me. Kaylin had lied, and not merely a casual untruth. She'd looked me directly in the eye, sent me a bland message about a client dinner, and meanwhile, had deliberately scheduled alone time with Denton as if I were some distant, easily rescheduled obligation. The true betrayal wasn't in what she said. It was in what she no longer said, in the way her calendar now vividly reflected a life that simply did not include me. I was utterly adrift, unsure how to process that devastating discovery. I didn't storm out. I didn't call her in a rage. I didn't violently throw her belongings into a suitcase and await some dramatic shouting match. Instead, I sat in that chilling silence and allowed its full weight to penetrate my being. How profoundly we had drifted. How utterly invisible I had become in a marriage that once felt like the safest haven I knew. Eventually, I rose and walked out to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. I kept glancing at the clock. 7:12 p.m., then 7:25. She would be arriving any minute. Not at a restaurant with colleagues, but somewhere intimate with him. I visualized the scene. Her walking in, perhaps gently brushing lint from his shoulder, laughing far too loudly at his jokes once again. Would she order wine? Would she speak about me as if I were merely complicated or going through something difficult? I desperately wanted to believe I was mistaken, that perhaps Denton was indeed a client, that the calendar entry was misleading. But deep down, I knew better. I had known for a while. I just hadn't permitted myself to see it with such clarity until this moment. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Kaylin, but it was not intended for me. I knew the instant I read it. Don't worry, he won't ask questions. He never does. I froze. It was a fatal error. She had meant to send it to him, to Denton, not me. My hands turned to ice. I read it 3 times, as if repetition might somehow cushion the blow. It didn't. She was talking about me, referring to me like some inert piece of background furniture. He never asks questions, as if I were too passive, too meek, too obtuse to notice. And worst of all, she was horrifyingly correct. I hadn't asked. Not when she stayed late. Not when she stopped sharing laughter with me. Not when she murmured, "I'm tired, one too many nights." I had excused it all, because I didn't want to admit what all those subtle signs unequivocally added up to. I stared at that message until the screen mercifully dimmed. Then I did something I never thought I was capable of. I replied, "Wrong person. No punctuation, no overt emotion, just unvarnished, brutal truth." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, her frantic reply. "Wait, I didn't mean. Can we talk?" Now, she wanted to talk. Now, after meticulously hiding him behind vague schedules and hollow corporate buzzwords. Now, after choosing him overtly in front of me at that cafe, and again this very evening, over a clandestine dinner. Now, when the carefully constructed lie had stumbled, fallen, and exposed its raw deceit. I didn't respond. For the very first time in our entire shared relationship, I desired her to feel the crushing weight of silence. I wanted her to sit in it, to wonder what thoughts raced through my mind, where I had gone, what I would do next. I wanted her to truly comprehend what it meant to be the one deliberately left in the desolate dark. So I left the house. No coat, no bag, just my keys, wallet, and a phone that incessantly buzzed with apologies I had no desire to read. I walked until the familiar neighborhood lights blurred into indistinct shadows, until the low hum of the streetlights became louder than my tumultuous thoughts. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all, and for the very first time, I wasn't afraid of what unknown future lay ahead. The sky still clung to darkness when I returned. I didn't bother to check the time. I didn't even consider whether she would be there. I simply walked, unlocked the door, and stepped inside as if entering someone else's unfamiliar house. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken tension, as if it had been holding its breath during my absence. Lights were off, the silence profound. I wondered for a fleeting moment if she'd stayed out with him. Would that truly surprise me now? But then I saw her shoes neatly placed by the door. She was home. I moved through the hall with deliberate quiet, not because I was attempting to sneak, but because I couldn't bear to hear my own footsteps echo in a place that no longer felt entirely mine. I carefully peeked into the bedroom. There she was, curled on her side of the bed, the blanket pulled high like a child seeking refuge from the perceived monsters in the dark. I watched her for a second too long. She looked peaceful, utterly relaxed. She shouldn't have been. I went to the kitchen, made coffee as I always did. Despite my hands trembling slightly, my phone buzzed again. Another text from her. I ignored it. I needed no more explanations, no more hollow excuses, and certainly no more of the insidious "it's not what it looks like." I had seen enough, felt enough. By the time she walked into the kitchen, barefoot and cautious, my mind was irrevocably made up. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, as if approaching a skittish, wounded animal. "Can we talk now?" I offered no answer. I poured coffee into 2 mugs. One for me, one I left on the counter for her. Not as a gesture of reconciliation, but purely out of ingrained habit. Old muscle memory. She reached for it, but didn't drink. "Emery, I'm sorry," she whispered. That was her opening. Just 2 words. The same words people use when they accidentally bump into you at the grocery store. Utterly inadequate for the profound damage she had wrought. I turned to her slowly. "How long has this been truly going on?" Her eyes dropped to the floor, avoiding my gaze. "It's not like that, Emery." "How long?" She hesitated, chewing on her lip, as if desperately trying to conjure a smaller, more palatable number. "We've gotten close over the last few months, but it's genuinely not physical. I swear it." I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest since that fateful morning in the cafe. So I was right. I wasn't just imagining things. "No," she said quickly, a desperate denial. "You're not crazy. Things haven't felt right between us, and he was just easy to talk to." I scoffed a bitter sound. "Right? Because it's such an insurmountable challenge to talk to your own husband." She stepped closer, her hand tentatively reaching out, but I instinctively stepped back, creating an invisible barrier. That small, almost imperceptible movement made her flinch visibly. "I didn't mean for it to escalate this far," she continued, her voice pleading. It happened slowly. I was feeling profoundly disconnected. You were always so quiet, so distant, so utterly checked out. And I know I should have talked to you instead of seeking connection elsewhere. I know that now." She looked at me, a silent plea in her eyes, waiting for something. Forgiveness, perhaps, or at least some visible reaction. But I wasn't about to grant her the relief of knowing the raw, turbulent emotions swirling within me. Not yet. I didn't cheat physically, she added quickly, as if that singular fact somehow reset the entire scoreboard. Right, I said flatly, my voice devoid of warmth. Because a betrayal is only real when clothes come off. She flinched again, visibly recoiling from my words. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. "Let me ask you something specific. Did you talk to him about me?" She hesitated, her silence a damning answer. "You did, didn't you?" "A little," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper, just when things were particularly tense between us. I needed someone to vent to. "So," I concluded, the realization chilling me to the core, "you meticulously transformed me into the villain in someone else's story, all while meticulously pretending I was the inherent problem in our own." Her mouth opened, then closed, a silent admission. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. That singular truth wounded me more deeply than anything else she had said. "I'm genuinely trying now," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I know I messed up profoundly, but I truly want to fix it." "What exactly is it you genuinely want to fix, Kaylin?" I asked, my voice cutting through her plea. "The marriage, or your overwhelming guilt?" She looked as though I had delivered a physical blow. I didn't intend to be cruel. I intended to be brutally honest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was speaking without softening the edges of truth. No filters, no desperate attempts to shield her from the harsh realities, because I had lived for too long in her suffocating silence. I had tiptoed around her growing detachment. I had fabricated countless excuses for her emotional distance. Convinced myself that I was being overly dramatic, excessively needy, far too sensitive. But now, the mask had irrevocably slipped, and her belated apology tour came far too late. "I don't know," she said quietly, her voice fragile. "I honestly don't know what I want anymore." There was the devastating sentence that cracked everything wide open. If she herself didn't even know what she wanted, then what precisely had I been so relentlessly fighting for? I stood up, my resolve hardening. "I'm going to stay with my brother for a few days." That declaration visibly shook her. "Wait, Emery. Please, let's talk this through, really talk." "We've been talking," I said, my voice flat. I just didn't realize I was the only one genuinely listening. I packed a small bag, just the bare essentials. I wasn't leaving forever. Not yet, but I desperately needed distance. Not just physical separation, but profound emotional space. I needed to remember who I was, stripped of the identity of being merely someone's afterthought. As I stepped towards a door, she uttered the one thing I genuinely didn't expect. "I chose him over you that day at the cafe, and I've regretted it every single minute since." I paused, turned back, and looked at her. She was openly crying now. Not performative tears, but the raw, shaking kind, racking her body. But strangely, it didn't move me with the same intensity it once would have, because now I understood something she never did. True regret only manifests when someone finally comprehends the profound value of what they had lost. And I was unequivocally done waiting to be someone's belated realization. The drive to my brother's place felt profoundly different than I had anticipated. I thought I'd be consumed by anger. I thought I'd cry uncontrollably, perhaps even feel utterly humiliated. But I felt none of those tumultuous emotions. What I felt, surprisingly, was an immense sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't shouldering her silence, her emotional distance, her half-hearted, fleeting affection. I was just me. No elaborate performance, no desperate begging, no cautious tiptoeing around someone else's constant disappointment. Nolan, my older brother, didn't bombard me with intrusive questions. He simply handed me a cold beer, generously offered me the more comfortable half of the couch, and allowed me to sit in companionable quiet. We talked about trivial, inconsequential things, absurd high school stories, how utterly incompetent our dad was at grilling, and how Nolan's mischievous kid somehow managed to break 3 remote controls in a single week. It wasn't deep intellectual conversation, but it felt like the profound act of breathing again. The next morning, I woke to a text message from Kaylin. She wrote that she needed time, that she was serious about seeking therapy, that she was willing to sever all contact with Denton and dedicate herself to rebuilding trust if I still harbored any desire for that. But she ended the message with something profoundly new. If not, I understand. I wouldn't blame you at all. That final sentence held immense significance because it marked the very first time she ceased centering her own feelings and finally created space for mine. I didn't reply immediately. I went for a long, reflective walk, pondering how much precious energy I had expended fighting for a warped version of us that had ceased to exist. I thought deeply about the man I had become, this quiet, perpetually anxious individual who constantly second-guessed his own instincts and passively accepted crumbs because he had mistakenly believed that love inherently meant suffering through suffocating silence. But love is not silence. Love is conscious, consistent effort. And I was, at last, learning how to channel that vital effort into myself. After a week, I returned home, not necessarily to reconcile, but simply to observe, to assess. Kaylin had cleaned the entire house, not in some superficial, hurried way, but genuinely and thoroughly. Her phone lay face up on the counter. No passwords. Her laptop was openly accessible. No deliberate secrecy. She didn't greet me with dramatic theatrics, just a tired, profoundly honest smile. "I've been reading," she said softly, her gaze steady, trying to genuinely figure out where I started losing you. I didn't rush to embrace her. I made no immediate promises of forgiveness or reconciliation, but we sat down. We talked, truly, deeply talked, about what both of us genuinely needed and where we had both fundamentally gone wrong. For the first time in a very long time, it felt like two individuals confronting the same shared problem, instead of each blaming the other for its existence. Will it ultimately work out? I honestly don't know. I'm no longer naive. But this time I'm not begging. I'm not chasing. I'm not willfully ignoring the glaring signs. We're either going to commit to doing the hard work together or not at all. But the part of this journey I am most profoundly proud of is this. I didn't allow her indifference to define me. I didn't let her mistake right my inherent worth. I remembered who I was, and, crucially, I chose myself. Tell us, have you ever experienced a moment when walking away from something or someone meant finally moving forward in your own life? Drop your story in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on Echo Tales. We hope this narrative resonated with you. Subscribe now for more compelling stories and never miss a new episode.